Welcome to R.S.V.P. Listen to the show at your own risk. We will be discussing all taboo subjects like religion, sex, violence, and even politics. You should be ready for controversy, disagreements, face-offs, and maybe some downright rumbles. Well, sit tight and get ready for this week's episode. And by the way, if you're squeamish about obscenities, don't listen to our fucking show!
Hello, everybody. It's Diane coming to you live from the Tampa, Florida area, where it is hot, humid, and sticky. Here in July, of course. What the hell else would it be, right? And I've got my beautiful, sexy, sultry co-host, Bernadette Desmond, coming live from Wazzy Land. How are you, darling?
Good, my love. How are you?
Huh?
Not bad.
Super.
Big week.
Big week. Super big week.
I know. We've got the opposite over here, actually. Like today's like quite balmy because it's overcast and it's raining. So, don't have to have my fire going this morning. And obviously I'm back at home in my studio. I'm not doing the show live from the car, from my brother's place in the back of the bush like we were last week.
Yeah, she's not homeless. She's actually has a home and she's back at home. I'm glad you're back. That was hard doing it in the car. It was weird. So I'm glad you're back. And of course, we have another fabulous show today, everybody. And it is about transgender, non-binary, and we really don't know what that means. And I know lots of you don't know what that means either. So Bernie and I said, we're going to talk about it because that's what we do. We talk about taboo topics that you're not going to talk about at your dining room table or dinner table with the fam. So we brought on a wonderful person today, with Kat Blackard, that we're going to talk to help us out because we do not want to be ignorant and we don't want to be thinking things and saying things stupid when it's not true. We want to really know what it means so that we can respect people. All people deserve to be respected. And remember, your opinion here, you can have any opinion you want, okay? But you're going to respect my opinion. You're going to respect Bernie's opinion, or we're going to agree to disagree, right, Bernie?
That's the way we roll off. That's the way we roll. And I think that this topic is like so relevant to today's society too, because honestly, when I started talking to people like as I go around in my daily life this week, so many of, say I'm heterosexual. So many people have got absolutely no idea about the gender spectrum and they don't know even what LGBTQ means. So they
I don't know what LGBTQ means, and I'm gay, and I don't even know what that means. So that's what I'm saying. People don't know. We need to get this out so we know what we're talking about, so we can talk to people and do the right thing and be respectful and have conversations and have coffee with people, for God's sakes.
Yeah, I think so. And just so that people have got some insight and understanding as to what it is. And I think too, like how to communicate effectively and how to communicate respectfully and, especially I think go down and teach that to our children because we've got kids that are in classrooms that are identifying as completely different genders. And I think Di and I were talking before the show, like there are probably the other kids in the classroom have probably got more idea about what that may mean. But I think adults generally, as a rule, unless you're in the inner circle or you've got friends, etc., I just don't think it's something that we talk about. So we haven't got any friggin' idea, frankly.
We don't. We have no friggin' idea. So we're going to get that all straightened out. So we're going to start off with our some funny and interesting topics and pictures to talk about before we bring on our great guest today. So let's take a look at this first one because this kind of really is just what it's like out there for most people. All right? What do you got for me, Bird? This is your first one about the dude here. This is one of my favorite movies, too. This is one of my favorite mafia movies.
Yeah.
Hey.
What's his name? What's old mate's name? Anyway. The actor?
This is good from Goodfellas.
Okay, yeah. So this is from Goodfellas, right? So and the caption is like, and then I said, I'm sorry I called you a dude. I didn't know that you were a pansexual, gender fluid, non-binary mocha frappuccino with a dual acting hydraulic cylinder and leather grip Swiss Army knife, who identifies as female. And I think
that's exactly what it's like. Nobody knows what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah, and we put that up not because we want to be disrespectful, but because honestly, if you don't know about all of these, gender identities, that's how you feel. You just think like, oh my God. And if we don't know, I think that, knowledge breeds, tolerance and education. Whereas, if you don't know about it, then it breeds ignorance. And I think ignorance.
Totally ignorance. Ignorance is
places where we don't want to go.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, so I found this chart, and it didn't help me too much, but we're going to look at it anyway. So this is my little chart, and apparently everybody in these identities have a colored flag, and I don't like the colored flags because I feel like I'm taking a colorblind test, but hey, it is what it is. So apparently here's some of the major captions for people with identities, and yeah, I just got myself more confused looking at it. So I'm so glad we got Cap on the show today because he's going to help us with this because I'm still confused.
Look, you know what? I'm looking at this and I'm looking at all of these pretty colors and I want to know why cisgender, which is like me, identify as the gender I was born with, why I'm like this just pale, insipid, grey and white color. I object to it. Well, sorry. I want to see like hot pinks and purples and blues and reds and greens and yellows.
All right. Well, I identify with the gender I was born with too.
Okay, so you too. Like, why can't we have some color in there? Come on, people.
Well, take out your crayon and make it whatever the hell you want.
I will be. Don't worry.
That's it. That's apparently what this is all about. You be who you are. Be what you want to be. Put your pink in there. Stop crying.
Where do these all come? Where do these all come from? Who decides all of these?
I don't know. That is a question maybe Cap knows, maybe she don't. I don't know, but I don't know. The hell do I know? Come on, Bert. You don't have to ask me. I don't know.
I know that you're a research nerd. Thought you might.
I'm a researcher, but this was making my brain hurt. It was.
Well, we can't have that.
I couldn't grasp all this.
We can't.
I'm too old, I think.
We can't have your brain hurting, dolls.
No, we cannot. All right, now we got the next one. Now this one, to me, kind of, it fits like what really is going on out there with my wolf man, right? And so here's my wolf man, and he's like, pretty much, I'm just a wolf. I eat people. What's the big deal? I'm just a wolf, What's the big problem here, folks? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's the way it should be. That's it. I don't identify as the wolf man, but I'm a wolf and I eat people. That's all.
Yeah, and so you're talking about the identity. He just identifies as being a wolf and he eats people.
Exactly. That's all. No big deal, right? I think that's the point that non-binary means, but I could be so wrong, but we'll see. But I think that's what I'm getting from it is that just that's who you are and that's who you're going to be and that's who you are and that's who I am and that's it. That's my gist. What do you think?
Yeah, I have a whole different take on that.
There's another take. All right, so you see I was wrong. All right, so let's get your last one up here. This is a very interesting story.
This is a really interesting story, and I guess this goes to the whole confusion and why there's so much confusion about things. So this is a picture of it looks like a man because he's a transgender man and he gave birth to his non-binary partner's baby using a female sperm donor, and the actual doctor was also a trans. So it's got to be, I guess, the most modern kind of family / birthing decision that you've made. But I guess this is why when people see pictures like this and they hear stories like this, they just go like their mind is blown and they just go like, what? They're like, how does that even actually work. And then a couple of people I spoke to this week said, so what happens to the kid? So does the kid get automatically identified as male and female at birth, or do they get identified as non-binary because they've got one parent who's non-binary and one parent who's a transgender man?
Right.
So it opens up all of these questions, and I guess I think, I don't know about you, but I'm just fucking confused.
I am, and I don't want to be confused. That's the whole point. I don't want to be confused, and I want to make sure when I'm out there, and I have actually met two people who identified as they. I didn't know what they were talking about, and I don't want to have that look of confusion on my face. I want to know so I can just have a nice conversation with people. So
yeah,
that's why we got Cap here. Okay, so we've got a wonderful guest. We've got Cap Blackard, and she is a wonderful storyteller. Okay, just a wonderful storyteller, and she specializes in writing and illustrating, and she's a fellow podcaster, okay, has a wonderful podcast, and she's the co-founder of the Nerdy Show Network, but best known, okay, for the award-winning audio drama, The Call of Cthulhu. I'm going to say it wrong. Cthulhu. There you go. Cthulhu Mystery Program, which is a fiction horror comedy. Okay, she is just so talented, and I'm so happy that she agreed to come on the show today to help us out with this. So let's get Cap Blackard on the show. Hey, Cap.
Lovely to meet you.
Oh, yes. I'm freaking ready, believe me, because I just was with Cap in March, Bernie. We were at Podfest, which is one of the most worldwide known Podfest conferences in the world, and we talked about this, and I'm still confused. It kind of evaporated out of my brain, so I need Cap again to bring it up.
Well, I feel like the information that I'm here to share is a lot like a consciousness expansion drug. It's going to change your perception of the human experience at large, which is a very good thing because the human experience definitely needs to change. So, first of all, Diane, congratulations. You got the closest to saying Cthulhu out of anybody who doesn't know what it is, I think, on record so far. Very close.
Congratulations, love.
I want to start by saying that that as we're here to answer a lot of, I guess, like in theory, we're speaking to an audience of folks who don't have a bearing on what it is to be transgender, what it is to be non-binary, what it is to exist outside of the gender spectrum that has been prevalent throughout the past 100 years, most of all. And I should say that if you meet somebody who is transgender or non-binary, please do not assume that they are going to give you all the answers for everything. It just so happens that I'm an educator on these subjects, so that's why I'm here doing this. But most people just want to live normal lives, so don't hassle them. Thanks. So I use she, her, and they, them pronouns. I identify as a non-binary transgender woman. It's a lot of words. Not too dissimilar from that Goodfellas meme that you shared, but I would say that Goodfellas meme is in bad spirits. I think it's very sarcastic, and there's a reason for all of these words. When Diane and I were initially talking about doing this episode, we talked about labels and how, Diane, you were like, why all these labels? Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And it's a question that I get a lot, especially from older queer folks, because there's been a lot of different fights for identity, and it seems weird to have any sort of interest in boxing yourself in, especially to these like extreme degrees of labeling the definitions of your own sexuality and so forth. I personally feel that these definitions, well, one, I think they're important, and I think that's we'll get into that, but I feel like these actually are heading towards a future that dismantles labels altogether. But in the meantime, these labels have to exist so that they can, these ideas, these narratives that are contrary to the cisgender, heterosexual, patriarchal, capitalistic narrative that has confined human existence, especially in the Western world, for a very long time. We need to dismantle all of that, because well, think about this. The human lifespan is rather short. We're a generation of people, multiple generations of people who have grown up in a world where mass media has always existed. So the narrative about what the human experience is has been shaped by a lot of forces that are not indicative of the actual experience of living on this planet. They're shaped like there's a world that humanity has created that's like an invisible landscape over the top of the planet we're actually living on. I know this sounds very cerebral, but the idea is that
You're killing me.
What's that, Diane?
You might have lost her a little while back.
Okay. I know. I'm getting quite lofty quite early. These are. I haven't felt the need to go this deep before, and I realize maybe I need some practice on the keep it simple stupid of this situation. Okay, so basically, let me ask you this: what's gender?
Whatever you want it to.
Oh, listen to her trying to be like.
No, but I think it is. Look, I understand what Cap's saying. Cap's talking about the whole patriarchal.
All I've known is gender is being a boy or girl. That's all I know. Being honest here, that's all I know.
Yeah, and that's fair. So the ideas of male and female, like we can of course all attest to the fact that people with penises and testicles and people with ovaries and vaginas have obviously been getting together for a very long time throughout the course of our species history, right? That's a given. But the stipulations on how those individuals are defined, the roles that they have in society, have changed exponentially across the course of human history and across different regions and cultures, etc.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So we find ourselves in a situation now where a lot of different ruling forces, controlling forces in the world have really, enforced for centuries limited expressions and created the concept of male and female insofar as like let's ignore the obvious item of biology, like that's obvious, right? But people's beings, the ways that things express themselves as individuals, have always varied exponentially, and that's not something that's limited just to human beings. So so to that end, gender as a concept, as an idea of what people with certain anatomy can do with their lives, how they can express themselves on a large scale or small scale basis, is a form of like this weird controlling idea. No one thinks about it, but it's self-enforcing, because if you violate that norm and whatever society said is male or female at a given time, then you're chastised, even indirectly, even if you're not getting, like, say, beaten up for being gay, for example. If you're a trans person, all of the reality around you is still saying, I know that you feel this way, but it's actually got to be over here where you don't want to be, where you feel fundamentally, existentially uncomfortable. So gender, I strongly feel gender as a concept hurts everyone, because if you're in a society where you are, say you're cisgender, and so you're born with a penis and testicles, and you like totally align with what's being projected as the male ideals, then great. You won't ever question that. But if say you cry, well, that's not very manly. Or, say you don't really care about sports. Well, what the hell's wrong with you, bro? So
right.
These are like, and of course that then there's everything that's put on women and what women are supposed to be like and how they're supposed to dress and all the standards, like how they need to kowtow to the gaze of the cisgender white heterosexual. And this is a problem, because we have this system that enforces thought control, and it hurts people. It makes people depressed. It makes people suicidal.
So I'm following you now a little bit better. Thank you for dumbing that down for me. I appreciate it. So,
I do apologize for going right into the deep end. These are things that are like with me all the time, and I'm like so excited to discuss them.
Your brain is too creative and out there. Listen, I get it. So look at just in the past 50, 60 years where women just started wearing pants.
Yeah.
And like Katharine Hepburn, who insisted she was going to wear pants and didn't give a shit what anybody thought. And it just took a while for people to accept, hey, what's the big friggin' deal? Women want to wear pants? Okay. Something as simple as that. It took a while for that to be able to be out there where it was just okay to do it.
Yeah. And like, why on earth should that be a big deal? But, fashion especially has been so strange over the centuries. That's a whole other subject, really. But
oh, I know. We do that all the time. We can talk about shows about everything we talk about here. I know.
Yeah. So gender is a construct. Now, that's saying that gender harms everyone isn't to dismiss someone's comfort or exuberance towards being able to express their gender or being able to express, say, if they're a trans person, or even just somebody who has felt trapped by the gender binary that they were born into, like, differing from that, say a woman who's been forced to wear skirts all of her life, actually wearing pants and being like, fuck yeah, I'm wearing pants. I can ride a horse like a boss now, like something like that. Those are all good, positive feelings. So, gender, sure. It is, as Bernadette said, like the way that you express yourself, but that's the definition that we're trying to get towards here. Like, for example, on an existential cosmic level, I have no idea why I'm a trans woman. I don't know why I'm drawn towards modalities of self-expression that skew in this direction. But I do know that it's a fundamental experience. I do know that the difference between my life prior to waking up to my truth as a trans person was one that was monochromatic in a larger sense. Like, I was totally disassociated from my body, and I was so used to that I only know that by comparison. I only know that by factually recognizing that, okay, I'm transgender, cool. So then I start that process. Then all of a sudden, I still remember clear as day, the moment I actually saw myself in the mirror for the first time, I was like, oh my God, I identify with having a physical body. And I thought I understood that before, but I genuinely didn't. Like, I genuinely did not identify with the meat that carries my thoughts around. And that's a crazy and terrible thing that can harm a lot of people. So
you literally felt like you were a trans woman in a male's body. Like, you felt like you were like more of a woman in a man's body. Like, it wasn't even you. Like, you just felt this body, you were trapped inside this body, and it wasn't how you felt as a person.
Yeah, in a sense. So the woman trapped in a man's body sort of thing, that concept is one that's rather archaic for a number of reasons, but it's not inherently wrong. It's that, I am, no matter what body I'm in, a woman, and my inability to express that because of being assigned male at birth was like, that was the trap. The body wasn't the trap. There's a good question for us as human beings to ask, what would it be like for transgender people to be born in a world without gender? Maybe there wouldn't be any pressure to transition as hard as some people need to escape from the confines that they've been pressed into. Because, depending on where you are and the family that you're born into, gender roles can be really intense. And that trauma can be, authentically trauma, just being asked to fit into that mold when that is not who you are.
I'm sorry, Bernie, go ahead.
I think that's a really valid point, because how many transgender people feel pressured almost to go through and actually physically transition into, the physical representation of, the gender that they identify with, because of what we're talking about here, like lack of understanding and lack of education out there in society and in families. I mean, there are so many families, I think, today that have got, I work in the school system and do counselling with teenagers. And even today, though we've got all of the tolerance and, you can get education online at the drop of a hat, we've still got teenage children that are afraid to express themselves because they don't know, one, whether they're going to be accepted. They don't know how. And people also generally around them, it's not that they wish them harm. It's just that they don't know how to deal with these young people that are identifying as something that is completely different, that the adults around them have got no an idea of what they're even talking about. So they can't even picture it. And it's causing so much trauma to young people.
Yeah. But what one of the things I think is so important about the trans visibility that we have now is not only the fact that these ideas are starting to be communicated in a way that people understand, which is where these different nomenclatures and titles and so on and labels actually do help. But it's also that the transgender people and the trans experience is a way to sort of help humanity see itself, in a sense, to realize how little we know about our species and the ways that we process information because of all, if you just look at the environmental disparity that's taking place based on the impact of the human animal, there's a lot that we still have to do to understand ourselves. And the fact is that trans people, intersex people, and non-binary people, we're all and always have been a part of the human experience. And if we don't know that about ourselves and our species, what else don't we know?
Oh God, that's a whole other show as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That could be a year worth of shows.
Yeah. That could be a whole year worth of shows. But getting back to the whole, dumbing things down, Cap, so I've got a list of gender spectrum pronouns, identities, etc. And I would tell you that even though, like I said, we've got all this information out there, the majority of people that I know have got zero idea about what these identities actually mean. So if somebody came up to them and said, I am a transgender, non-binary, trans-masculine person or whatever it is, people like that Goodfellows thing would be going like, oh my God, what are you talking about? I can't deal with it. I don't know, so I don't want to know. So, and this is one of the things Di was talking about. Di's going she goes, I've got no idea. She goes, what some of these things even mean. So can you help us out here if I throw some of these out for you?
Sure. I hope to. I mean, I'll speak to whatever experiences that I can hopefully, inform on, even if they're not outside my own, I'll do my
That's
best.
Great. Okay, so one of the things that came up is Two-Spirit.
Yeah. Two-Spirit is a term that's used specifically by Indigenous peoples. I think, predominantly Native American, I suppose the first peoples of the continent of North America and South America. But I I think there's an application for it more globally. Again, I'm doing the best I can here to make sure that I'm on point. But so it is essentially a cultural state of being denoting transness or queerness. It can take a lot of different forms, but it's outside of the purview of white folks. So there was a time where people were widely using the term Two-Spirit. I even did it myself, but I didn't realize that was cultural appropriation and that it wasn't just, that was when there was a time in my life where I was doing a lot of, early into my transition, I was exploring my non-binary aspects and was hesitant to commit to my skewing of very strongly trans feminine. Two-Spirit is a term specifically for Indigenous peoples and relating to their individual tribal cultures.
Yeah. And so, and maybe too, just the difference between a lot non-binary. So a lot of people have got no idea what non-binary is and how do people identify as multiple identities. So maybe trans, feminine, non-binary, etc. What is that, and how does that roll?
Do that one first for me and for everybody else out there listening.
Okay, so
that first.
To be non-binary is simply to be outside of the gender spectrum. If you say I identify as a woman, but I was born with ovaries and a vagina, but all of those aspects of what I perceive as femininity in my culture, in the world, those are not for me. the ways that I feel like natural in the ways that I move my body, in the way that I talk, everything about me does not say like I am of that. I will own my femininity. I will like represent like perhaps a piece of my feminine culture, and I'm not going to reject that part of myself. But I am not adhering to that. So it is an amorphous term. It can mean any like a lot of different things. But mostly it is saying, you know, I am outside of that polarized idea of what a human being can be.
Okay.
So in
Okay.
say trans feminine and non-binary. So I'm a non-binary transgender woman. Now obviously by looking at me you can tell that I skew pretty feminine, but that's still not the full extent of who I am. And I kind of, you know, I've, as you can tell by my very early rant into this discussion, I feel pretty strongly that gender is something that that's a construct that ideally would be done away with, and everyone's personal identity would be their personal identity, and that's all anybody has to say about it. But we'll see, because this is evolving. This is a massive collaborative art project with all the people of the world to figure out what self-expression is, right?
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's that too. And I think that's one of the things, because I think a lot of straight people, if I can use that term, like say myself, for instance, a lot of people are questioning the whole gender thing and thinking, okay, so is this about identity or is it about sexuality and sexual attraction? Because I think a lot of people get really confused about that, you know, when they're talking about gender too, because if you're a male, then you're supposed to be attracted to a female. If you're a female, then you're supposed to be attracted to a male.
Yeah, well, it is all, you know, like tied in like a big tangle of wires.
Yeah.
But all those things are completely separate. You know, like I early on into my life, like I thought, well, I can't be a trans woman. I'm attracted to women. Like that's impossible. I didn't the idea of like because I had, you know, merged the notions of gender and sexuality so much. But the fact is that's my truth. And when I live that truth, I feel joy. And you know, everyone deserves that.
Okay, so can we stop a second? Let me make sure I'm following. Okay, Cap. So saying that as a transgender woman, and you just happen to be attracted to women.
Uh-huh.
So there certainly can be then transgender women that are attracted to men, right?
Yes. Yep.
So what you're trying to say is we should just leave the sexual biological aspect out of this equation. Would that be correct?
I think I can agree to that, to those words. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm trying to make it as simple
long as people have bodily autonomy, you know,
because there's so many other people that are not going to understand this, and that would help if we could just look at gender as an identity and not related to the sexual biology aspect.
Yes, as Bernadette said, it's like it is how you represent yourself. Now, maybe from the moment I'm born, I feel that my anatomy is incongruent with everything about what's happening in my mind. And that's a true thing. There are like young trans girls who I've heard like stories about them like almost cutting off their penises because like as very young single digit children, because the trauma of being inside of this body that's incongruous with their heart is so severe. And if you think about that, just think about that notion of like, you know, people will argue that kids don't understand gender, or I mean, all you have to do is look at a situation like that and think, okay, how did that happen? That's very complicated, and that definitely speaks to a inherent truth about that person was born in that way. And as soon as in that story that I'm thinking of specifically, as soon as that child was allowed to start expressing themselves through femininity, everything about them changed. And I don't know how their acceptance was with their biological body, here's one little aside. Words are dangerous. Words are limiting. Yeah. And presently we might have all these new words and terms, but we actually don't have enough of them, because male and female are words that are tagged to sex and to gender, and then there's so much about our world that sort of points to a biological imperative, which is inherently binary. But then intersex people exist, people who are born with chromosomal characteristics and secondary sex characteristics that are neither male nor female. And they are very real. There are as many of them in the world as there are redheads. And these are people who have been systematically abused by medical systems to conform to binary gender stereotypes for their bodies. They have been physically, surgically mutilated by pediatric doctors from birth. And it's a whole thing. You should check out the hashtag End Intersex Surgery. It's a really important dialogue. But this is indicative of how humanity has pondered about our existence in many interesting, fascinating ways, but we just don't know everything about ourselves yet.
I agree. And going back to the mutilation with the intersex people, like and I guess like this is kind of what you're talking about. Like what I'm hearing from you is that we need to have all of these labels, even though we don't want to have labels, right? So to break down all of the gender specifics so that we can break the mold of being bound by patriarchal systems in society that are happening, not just like on a spiritual level, but an emotional and a physical and a financial level. And if we did that, like we've got parents that are making, right? Like we've got parents that are making these decisions for their children based on these beliefs that we've all been brought up with through no fault of like anybody's. And okay, so am I going to make this child a male or am I going to make this child a female? And the baby's like a baby, so they've got obviously no say in it. And then these children are then growing up, and it could be that, they've been made a male and they really wanted to be identified, or their soul is identifying as a non-binary person. So there's massive implications. And thanks so much, Kat, because I've always believed that in ourselves we have male and female anyway.
Yeah.
Take away, I know that there are times, and especially in our society today, we've got women that are going out to work, which inherently, traditionally used to be a male role.
Right.
Okay. And then we've got dads that are staying home, being staying home dads, etc., which was traditionally a female role. So the whole of society is fluid and changing and evolving. And I feel this is just part of that. We just need more conversations like this in education so mainstream society can get that it's part of a bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that was very eloquent. Thank you.
Very eloquent.
That kiss. I know. Yeah, well, I need to have a little bit more wine and I could be a little less eloquent. But anyway, that's another story.
All right. I'm hanging on. So keep me there.
Keep you there. Okay. So,
let's hear your
gender.
Story,
Is gender fluid different to like non-binary?
Can I have her tell her story? I want to hear her actual story.
Yeah.
My story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Look at her face. She's going, my story?
Sure. Okay. Let me do this quick version. All right. So I was assigned male at birth. And I won the lottery because I existed in a world where I was a white male who was attracted to women, therefore could identify as heterosexual, and my family were pretty well off. So I didn't have any of these social barriers, I could just go do it. But I was also inherently a weirdo. And fortunately for me, my parents were both sort of the arts community, and they got that. And I also was born with a non-binary name. Cap is the name I've had since birth. So I sort of existed as this little non-binary creature for quite some time, but I did have a lot of influences that would skew me away from my feminine expression from a very, very young age. Even if that wasn't necessarily being enforced, I didn't have the words for it. I couldn't put it into being, and everything was telling me like, hey, no, you're normal. Everything's good. It's fine. And there's different reasons to just push down all of those aspects about yourself that aren't conforming to everything else. But you can be weird in other ways. So you've got an outlet. Great.
Yeah.
And let's see. I about 10 years ago at this point, had a nervous breakdown. I was just getting out of college. I was like entering into the workforce, and everything was changing. And I also developed a caffeine intolerance. So my brain was going in all kinds of different directions, and I just snapped. And something that I think is probably like very, very true. I don't have data to back this up necessarily. It's something I'd like to look into, quite frankly. But I think that in a world where the full spectrum of what can be transgender, like if we live in a world that doesn't tell people about what it is to be transgender, that trans kids don't recognize all the different ways that, or just people in general don't recognize all the ways that gender can twist and morph and be different things. It's hard. You need to have trauma to provoke the crazy step to say, actually, no, I'm transgender. That's not something you can, like, these days it's getting a little bit safer, but it's in the past, it's not something you could safely do, let alone 10 years ago. So, because in my mind, a transgender person was someone who was attracted to men, who pursued gender reassignment surgery, and was at odds with their anatomy, and that wasn't me at all. So I didn't know that I could like be okay with the fact that I have a penis, and I didn't know that I could be attracted to women and then also be a transgender person. And so because I didn't know that, and because I kind of had to like learn that the hard way, and because I was also like afraid of the social consequences of being like of having a partner. I've been with my partner for 17 years, like being with someone who I've been with this whole time, and changing that paradigm to a significant degree. And so I was like, okay, hey, so I'm non-binary, and I was non-binary for quite some time, and that my expression of that shifted. I was a person with like facial hair and eye makeup and pink hair, and wore skirts, and basically this gender fuck mess, this beautiful cacophony of different gender ideas. But eventually I realized that like through a lot of like self-study, I was able to actually like see myself through meditation and yoga actually. And I experienced myself stripped of all of the baggage that I was holding on to, and saw how like, okay, you're not just non-binary, like at your core you are, for whatever it means, a feminine entity. So over 2 years ago I started hormone replacement therapy because and I thought it was actually pretty simple, pretty functional. I didn't think I'm going to become a woman. I thought I want my body to be mine. I didn't want to take off my clothes and not be me anymore. I didn't want my clothing to be what was defining the way that other people looked at me and treated me and the way I felt about myself. So I wanted to have some kind of a change, and I did not have any clue the cosmic way that my perception of reality was going to change from taking hormone replacement therapy. My entire human experience has been rewired, and it's a beautiful and euphoric thing. It's been challenging, absolutely, but you know, socially, but it's remarkable. I'm complete. I did not know what I was missing. Like, I can see now looking back, I'm like, holy shit. Everything about my life was like a wasteland, that like I had it so good winning that like male white heterosexual lottery, that it, you know, like, boo-hoo, poor me, but it was like this weird gilded cage where I couldn't be myself, and then I and even internally couldn't see how I could be myself.
Wow. Beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's
And
beautiful.
can I say too that like just even watching you tell your story is you can see your soul shining through. Like, honestly, you can see that what you're saying is absolutely true for you. And I mean, I think that's such a beautiful thing. And if we can see more of that in humanity, what difference could we make in the world? Like if we were all living that for ourselves, like honestly.
Because I know
it gives me
I'm a better
goosebumps.
person, and I can do more for the world as me. Like with I've seen it, I've felt it, and everything has been exponentially better since I did this. And I definitely want to pay it forward,
Yeah.
Everyone should be allowed to be me, right? Everybody should be able to say, that's me, and now I can move forward and I have so much to offer. That's the way how it should be.
Yeah, we will live in a fuller, better world if everyone is empowered to feel this way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just to have acceptance, like agreeing to disagree, that's one of the things that Di always bang on about doing this podcast is like, sometimes we will like be button heads all the time, but we still love each other. And that acceptance around that, even though, like the acceptance around, even though we may not agree, that's okay. Whereas if we had that out in the world too, then, imagine what a difference that would make. I mean, like I don't need to have your express opinions or agree with you wholeheartedly in order for me to think that you're a good person or that you're worth loving or that you're not worth loving, etc. I don't need that in humanity. So, and if we could all do that again, like imagine what differences we'd be able to make. It's so cool talking to you, Kat, because for me, it's something I think that I've felt myself for a long time about, just acceptance of humanity and people and not seeing people as things or objects, just seeing them, their hearts and their souls. But we need a lot more of that out there in humanity. And if having these conversations, and I know for people, all of these labels get really, really overwhelming. It does for me too, because we don't understand what they actually mean. But if you can put it in the context that was actually trying to break free of really old patriarchal binding systems so that we can have a true evolution, I think people will be able to be a lot more accepting, even if you don't agree with it, for religious reasons or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I hope so anyway.
Except for the people that are on the extreme side of religion, where they won't let anything interfere with what their religional rights say. Most of the other people will absolutely come to terms with it, and even if they don't agree, they will accept it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's so much beauty in the world, and this is all about this acceptance is all about love and beauty and acceptance and living lives that are not rooted in being controlled by fear, which is something that all of us can aspire to, no matter what our background is and no matter how we see ourselves.
Yeah. All right, let's get back to some definitions.
I read a story.
Let's get back to they. What's they? I like if someone refers to themselves as they.
Great. So they is a pronoun commonly used by non-binary people. They in a singular sense has been around a very long time. In fact, I don't know the history off the top of my head very clearly, but it's my understanding that they as a singular pronoun in the English language actually predated common use of gendered language, gendered pronouns. Because the English language evolves, but humans fear change. So once things get stuck, they get stuck. One thing I want to emphasize is that words are both a blessing and a curse here. So we're trying to use words for good, but we also allow words to exist as absolute. We forget that we're the people who invented the words. We let the words control us. So they is just sort of a blanket term. It can make it a little bit jarring because we're as English speakers unfamiliar to using it in that context for an individual without it. But we do use it. We use it passively for individuals when we don't know who we're talking about usually. So it's there. There are also neopronouns like Spivak pronouns, which is e and as opposed to like she and her, or z and zim, and a bunch of other things. It's up to the individual generally, and most people who are using these neopronouns or they them, have the capacity to assert that in some way. Maybe they'll have a button. Maybe they'll be used to kindly telling people, oh, actually these are my pronouns, and the best anyone can do is just try to do it. Treat it like a game. Be like, okay, cool. Can I get this? Just don't be annoyed about it, because if you listeners out there catch yourself being annoyed by this practice, just know that it is a kindness. Treat it like a game if you like. See if you can do it, because you're so smart. Then try to get it right.
And I think another one is MX, right? Instead of saying like Mr. or Mrs. or Ms. is MX. So some
mix.
non-binary people will use that too, or trans people use MX as well.
Yeah.
This has been so interesting, and I'm sure, honestly, we could be talking for forever. Could we?
It's all a work in progress, right? Like we will at some point hopefully reshape our language, whether it maintains being English or something else. We'll figure out how to make it something that works for everybody.
I agree.
We will.
I agree.
Wow.
Hey, just quickly before we go, have you heard of James Clifford Sharpe? SHUPE? Cap?
I don't think so.
Okay, so James Clifford Sharpe was the very first person in US history in 2016 to get his sex legally designated as non-binary. And he was in the US Army. And in 2019, so he changed his name from James to Jamie then. And then in 2019, he re-identified as his designated sex, which was male. And now he is a big critic of gender identity.
Really? That's odd.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. So I was going to say, so is that like an unusual kind of thing? Like, would that be an unusual example of somebody that would be, I don't know, identifying as non-binary, change your name?
Yeah, that's not normal. I'm sorry that person had a bad experience. Because the fact is, there's a lot of people in the world for whom this brings like joy and self-identification and changes their life for the better. So don't be a dick, guy. I mean,
yeah. Please.
It was
don't
really.
We don't like people being dicks. No.
No.
See, that can be.
No.
That's
we don't want to be. We don't want to be.
No,
look,
don't be a dick.
And we don't want to be in vaginas either, right? So we don't want dicks, so we don't want vaginas. So so we don't want to be doing that whole gender thing now. That whole this is masculine, female. Just don't be, I don't know, a knob.
Yeah,
a knob.
A what?
So,
what did you say?
I got a question I want to ask you then, Cap. What would be the best thing for a person to do if they were somewhere and they were having a conversation with a person? They had no idea if they were trans, if they were non-binary. What's the best way to talk to that person? They're going to have that fear that they don't know how to address them. What's the best thing someone should do?
The best thing you can do is just very politely say hey, so the same way you'd ask somebody their name, what are your personal pronouns? Or what are your pronouns? That it is that easy. And if someone, especially if someone is using pronouns that, or has gone through a transition or anything like that, they'll be used to it and they'll be grateful for that you've been kind enough to ask.
Beautiful. Because I know that's something that a lot of people want to know. So that's great. Just ask.
Yeah.
And I think just treat people like they're human beings, right? That they're a human being. You're a human being. I'm a human being, and I think also too, people would use their own pronouns when they're speaking to you. So if we were having a conversation, and you were referring to yourself as they or them, then they would use those pronouns. So I don't know. I just pick up on that and go, okay, well, that's how they'd like to be referred to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, respect goes a long way. I mean, we should all be respectful of each other. So that's the game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cap, I can't thank you so much. You've really helped me this time. I think I finally got it. I think I finally got just the basic gist now, finally. Thank you so much. I think that's what I needed, that one-on-one, right, with you. So for people out there, are you open to questions if they wanted to email you?
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at CapBlackard. If you go to capblackard.com, you'll be directed to my Patreon. I'm Diane or Bernadette said something earlier about how that would be a whole other discussion relating to the deep philosophical meanderings about being trans. I'm working on a show about exactly that. It's called Transcend. We don't have a launch date yet, thanks to the pandemic sort of throwing off my schedule. But we're working on it, and my personal Patreon is where the work for that's being directly funded.
Well, I cannot wait to see that and hear that. That's going to be absolutely a wonderful series. I look forward to it. Please let me know when there's a date, and we'll announce it. Okay?
Oh, excellent. Yeah, we'll do.
Yeah, and please be available for us if we want to come back and do another show on another topic that you can relate to. Will you?
Sure thing. Anytime. Happy to do it.
All right.
Happy to talk.
Thank you so much, Cap.
Thanks,
you were a
Cap.
blessing, and you really helped us out big time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, she did. Thanks, Cap. It was amazing. Lovely to meet you too.
Yeah, likewise, Bernadette.
All right.
Yeah, hopefully we can meet each other in the flesh when all this pandemic stuff
Someday.
goes away. Yeah,
Someday.
someday. That was amazing. I loved it.
Amazing.
Yeah. So
Absolutely
are you less confused now, love?
Oh yes, much better. I'm much better now. Now that I just took away the whole sexual identity part of it and just left it as gender as an identity, I'm much better now.
Yeah, and I think that that's such a huge thing. I took that away too. I reckon that's such a huge thing for everybody that's out there that's struggling with understanding the concepts of it. Is, like Cap said, dumbing the whole thing down. I think that just shines a light on what it's really about. So you don't have to get so confused about it, and just being respectful. And if you're not sure, then just ask someone politely and go like, hey, not really sure. How would you like me to speak to you? Like, what would you like me to do? Which is kind of what we should be doing anyway, right?
That's what we should be doing anyway. And they're missing out because they are with such loving and intelligent and creative people. And people are going to miss out on wonderful ideas and conversations if they don't interact with others. So just if you're sitting at the bar or you're sitting at a coffee shop, just turn around and ask someone, hey, what pronouns do you like to use? And get in the conversation. Have some respect for each other.
And love. Share the love, people.
Well, thanks again, ladies. It's been awesome.
Ciao, love. We're off.
Ciao.
Welcome to R.S.V.P. Listen to the show at your own risk. We will be discussing all taboo subjects like religion, sex, violence, and even politics. You should be ready for controversy, disagreements, face-offs, and maybe some downright rumbles. Well, sit tight and get ready for this week's episode. And by the way, if you're squeamish about obscenities, don't listen to our fucking show!